Okay. So before we get started, I just wanted to give a quick introduction again for those who've missed the LinkedIn update or our last webinar. Myself and Gavin are taking on the co-host position for the Ask and Tell with MSL's webinar. We really are excited to get involved in the webinar. I've been listening in for quite a few months, and we're excited to take on this leadership position and continue with the future webinars. So with that, we'd like to formally invite everyone to connect with us on LinkedIn. And Lindsay and Renee are actively still involved in the webinar. We're just taking on the co-host role. So with that, I'll get started with introducing our speaker. So like I mentioned, Dr. Guadalupe Navarro has a PhD background. She did her bachelor's degree at the University of Chicago in Illinois, and she then did her PhD at Northwestern in molecular and cell biology. After completing her PhD, she moved on to a postdoc position at Stanford University, and has since then taken on multiple roles in industry, including the role she'll be talking about today, medical science liaison, where she's MSL at Takeda Pharmaceuticals, specifically in immunology and rare diseases. So we are very, very pleased to have Dr. Navarro speak today. We're specifically focusing in on building and engaging your network as an MSL, but we have a variety of different questions before we get to that main topic. And please, we invite all audience members to submit any new questions that you have in the chat. And we can also allow yourselves to unmute yourselves when we finish the prepared questions that you've submitted in your registration. So with that, I'd like to open up to Guadalupe. Are there any points in your background that you would like to discuss before we get started that have led you to your first position as an MSL?
First of all, thank you, Sonia and Gavin, for that invitation. I think this is a great forum. And, you know, I'm just a few years ahead of the game, but I was where, you know, a few years where we all started in the same place. So glad to be here and to provide what it has been useful to my career. As you mentioned, I'm a PhD by training, and I, to start with that, you mentioned what it's been, you know, what took me to where I am here. I think the first point that I can share is to be, you need to know yourself, what you want. Then that being an MSL or, you know, medical affairs or anything, that you have to convince yourself that that's what you want to be. And that preparation, this journey, I think is mostly like an internal process as well. Like you have to convince yourself, then you can do the job and be, you know, that confidence, you have to transmit it in each interview. So I think then, you know, there is not a recipe. Everyone is unique. Everyone is different, and build on that, having those skills, and you know what you want. I think that's the first step.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, that's really helpful to know. It's a very tailored process for each applicant there. That's perfect. So with that, we have some questions about the application process itself. And we do have some current audience members who are actually applying for MSL positions right now. And they really want to know more about tailoring your position and knowing what exactly will make them stand out as an applicant. So we have one question from the audience member who asked, given that I'm in the job hunt mode, I find it very hard to know how to continually add value to my network, especially in the clinical research industry. And they're asking for advice on how to engage their network as they are reaching out to members in their community in order to effectively job hunt as an MSL.
That's a great question. And I think that, you know, staying abroad or what's the latest publication in that area, that's helpful, but this is a general question. And I think that, in terms of application, um, I think that people should be flexible and open, like not really restricted yourself to apply to cancer biology because you are in that area, or diabetes or obesity. I think as a PhD, those are the transferable skills, so they need to apply to any. So I think then just staying in communication with that person has to be specific in what that person is working, in what field. And just in general, that it has to be some active listening and not force that relationship, not to be continually. It's just like having a organic. If you had that conversation with that person, you got a taste in what he or she is interested and tailor about that. But sometimes there should be a limit, not be constantly over emailing or over communicating unless there is strict already established relationship. So it's important to be careful to maintain that relationship. And it's hard, so it has to be specific about the field of that person.
Mhm. That's really good to know. And we have a few questions on how to cultivate those organic conversations coming up in a bit. We then had another question about applying to the MSL role. So first of all, how did you get your first MSL position? And what skills made it possible to be a competitive applicant for that role?
Great question. And it might sound strange, but when I was a postdoc, I used to get discouraged because I will go to the career workshop seminars or those events, and they always say, network, 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 that's the key. To me, honestly, networking did not work. All the it was a long process. I think it took me almost 2 years to land my MSL job. And most of the interviews that I landed, it was due to direct application to the company website. I did interview with a few, like external companies, like those not directly by the companies, but those were useful to get exposure, to get experience. But I recommend connecting with the recruiters from the company, with the big companies, because that's the easiest and direct way to get there. And also networking with a hiring manager. And through LinkedIn, we should be able, to get information who are in particular team. So I think that was key for me to get my first job. Like, honestly, I kept applying and applying, regardless of my therapeutic area. And that was, not networking. Only one, a friend of mine, he was able to submit a referral. I did interview for a first round, but that was all. But so, that's my advice, not be discouraged. Again, everyone's journey is unique, and just be persistent.
That's really good advice. And it's helpful to know that even though everyone says network, 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 we have to be specific in how you go about that, specifically with the recruiters and hiring managers and people who are part of that application process. And we do have a specific question related to application process. So we have a question from Renee. Did you choose to continue as a postdoc during those 2 years? Or did you gain experience in another position while you were applying for MSL positions?
That's a great question. And that goes back to know what you want. When I was a grad student, I loved the science, I still love, but at that time, I was not familiar with the MSL job. Even in my postdoc, I knew then I wanted to run my own laboratory, but we all know things don't always work as we plan. I tried consulting first. And it was a great experience, but I find out and that's not what I wanted. I needed to get some financial skills. It did not align with my plan. And after that brief stint in consulting, as strange as it sounds, I went back to academia. And it was during academia, then I was actively preparing myself for the MSL role. So I was working as a research assistant professor and at the same time, like applying and even, writing grants because I never took anything for granted. So even I still, I had plan A and plan B. But I'm glad that, I was able to get in the MSL.
Yes, excellent. Well, it's good to know that you can gain the right skills that you need for this role from a variety of methods. Okay, that's excellent. So we do have some questions specifically about the role and what it entails on a day-to-day basis. So we have a question from the audience just asking, what does the role look like on an everyday basis? What do you do? You typically, I know it changes from week to week, but what is the majority of your time spent on?
Yeah, you're right. Every week, every day, it's mostly different. I think when there's still hybrid, even now, most of the physicians, they're still used to the visual option just because it's easier to cancel or to, adjust the meeting time. So there are weeks when I cover 10 states.
Mhm.
So I try to optimize when I'm gonna be, let's say, in Nebraska. So I try to book as many meetings as possible.
Mhm.
So, there are a week there and then 1 week in town. So when working, when traveling, so it might be one meeting in the morning, one in the afternoon or so. But then when I'm home, it's just internal meetings and visual meetings. Then I try to alternate
Mhm.
like that. But, it varies. But a lot of the times, and for those who had been doing the job, the challenge, it's getting that meeting, getting that reply. So it's a continuous outreach. So I'll say then a significant amount of my time is devoted to, trying to find how to get those meetings. Email works, but there's still some providers. And I said providers because, we always say KOLs. KOLs, there are very few. And we still are, it depends on the product and the company, but it's very important also to reach out to HCPs, even nurses or PAs. So I prefer to use HCPs versus KOLs. Because another thing to share with those who are, trying to break into this, getting a meeting with a KOL is easier. They're business person. They know how to do this. But for those who are not so well known, that's the challenge. How do we get to their attention and how do we keep expanding the list? So that would say then that's most of the time, all my time goes to one, trying to outreach to getting those meetings by email or even by stopping by just like cold calls, because there are some providers who they don't reply to emails. They just open to meet with the MSL as long as they start by their office. That's how they work. So that's important to know that. And another portion of the time is to prepare for the meeting, particularly for the first time. It's very important to be prepared and to be confident because that initial meeting is what is going to take you to the second and subsequent meeting. So that's very important to prepare and to know the objectives. Like, what do you want to achieve? But at the same time, try to have like a conversation and not like, I know that it has happened sometimes and it goes like an interview, but it's just having a genuine conversation.
Well, thank you. That's a very thorough description of what MSLs are doing on a daily basis and juggling all those tasks. And I have a follow-up question before we move to the next one. You mentioned you have a 10-state territory. How do you manage speaking with healthcare providers and KOLs across that large of a territory?
That's a great question, Sonia. And the fact that I had 10 states is because I work in an ultra rare disorder, hereditary angioedema. So this is very different. And my opinion, it's very different from someone who works in diabetes or inflammatory bowel disorder, because that's more prevalent. I work in hereditary angioedema when there are approximately only 8,000 individuals with this disorder in the US. So in these 10 states, including Puerto Rico, there are only 3 national KOLs. So, that's easy to manage. And a lot of, so I call on allergists and immunologists. So, it's somehow easy because there are it's a very small community. Then, we get to know each other. So in that sense, it might seem like a lot, 10 states, but it's manageable, just being a rare disorders.
Yeah, that's a very different size to manage compared to some others. Excellent. So we have a few more in the chat we'll definitely get to. We have a few questions regarding the role again. Someone just wanted you to comment on the flexibility in the role. So I guess kind of professionally flexibility as well as just time flexibility that you can comment on the MSL role.
It's very flexible. And again, it might vary. It varies by companies. Again, the size of the company, the therapeutic area, it's very different. So that I can only speak for my experience. But I think that to me, the first year was that one that I was very active traveling but that was pre-pandemic as well. So, but it was a learning process. Now it's just completely flexible.
Okay.
It might be also due to the fact that it's a rare disorder. There's not many KOLs, but still we target HCPs, like even community allergists. So it's very flexible. I'll say then, for those who had like a family and kids, it might be only the first year, then it's most intense, traveling and building those relationships. Because, after, it is a continuous process, but it is more intense the first year because KOLs, they get to know you. So, it becomes a natural relationship. Then they adjust their time and they're happy to meet once you have established that relationship. So in terms of flexibility, that's great. And with time, it becomes easier.
Okay, that's really great to know. And then we have that question again that brings up what skills do you find to be most valuable in your day-to-day role as an MSL right now?
Great question. And honestly, that's, again, I know I've been repetitive, but I cannot highlight enough about the confidence thing we had to have as a PhD student. And again, my training is in PhD, so, I cannot speak for other profession. But those transferable skills, if we think about it, teaching skills, that's crucial for an MSL. We had to be constantly going over data, showing the data and the key points. This in presentations, we are used to present, whether that's our committee meetings or lab meetings. So this is our daily activities that we do. And we undermine those, but this is at the core of the MSL. And we had to make sure that we highlight that and then we communicate that during our interviews. And second, analytical thinking. We are, that's why we are in a PhD, to try to investigate the unknown. So, and this is a second nature. We just had to be a critical thinking what the data is telling us. So that's important to think outside the box. And independent thinking. This is a role. Then you need to be at home. You need to be at your home office. Nobody is telling you what to do. It is like your own business thing. And that's the beauty of the MSL job. Then, it's completely independent. You have to set your goals, your expectations, and plan according to that. And of course, they had to align with a medical strategy of the company. But, that's very important. Then our company has metrics, others they might or might not, but it's about having that independence to do your job in a daily basis. And that in the last thing, integrity. I think that's very important. Then and we as a grad students, we had that it is a trial and error. There are many times that the experiment did not work. And we cannot hide. We had to be honest with our mentor when something did not work. And it might be a costly experiment. So that, there are weeks, and again, it's challenging to get those meetings, but you have to be honest. And I think then that's, eventually that integrity, it has to be transmitted. It has to reflect with the clients. Mm-hmm. When we are with our customers, there has to be a genuine care. And I think then that's easier when you are really into the role. Then it's not because you want to meet the metrics. It's because you are excited to be there to provide a value to the HCPs. So I think then, I cannot emphasize enough with those 4 transferable skills. That teaching skills, in analytical thinking, independent thinking, and integrity. And again, we have these skills already. It's just teaching ourselves how to be able to communicate that, to persuade the hiring manager during that interview.
Mm-hmm. That's really, really helpful to hear. And just as a note for everybody, you can go back and listen to this recording. These are excellent points, and you'll be able to hear this and take notes if you need to when we upload this video to YouTube. That was really helpful to hear. And then we have one more question about the MSL role before we dive a little bit deeper into the networking aspect. So an audience member wants to know, what surprised you the most when you started working in medical affairs as an industry, or even just the MSL role that was not what you anticipated?
Honestly, what I was surprised, it's then it is much less demanding than being a grad student or being a faculty in academia. That's what I cannot emphasize enough. Then, as a grad student, we are prepared to do this job. It's just about, and we are so concentrated in the science, and we are never taught as a grad students, like it's not business school. So then, we need those skills of how to sell ourselves, because it is just, I was surprised. Then it was very easy to do the MSL job compared to being a grad student, honestly. Mm-hmm. Because, you all know, then we had to have yearly committee meetings. We had to do experiments. We had to analyze data. We had to do figures, write papers. And for those of you who were or are in the NIH grant, in addition to that, we had to provide yearly updates, and I think monthly, it depends, but it's a constantly work. Weekly or monthly seminars, then we had to do. So that was really an intense work. Nothing compared with, as an MSL, compliance plays a huge role. We are there's specific language that we had to use, because the data is the data, and it's important what we are going to communicate. So we are trained on that. So that's easy. The slide decks, they already made for us. They had to be approved by a legal and medical affairs. So we just had to customize those, delete, or, how long we want that presentation. But that's honestly that the being in a training, whether that's a PharmD, MD, or PhD, we are already very well equipped to do the MSL job, because it just easier after undergoing all those years of training.
Well, it's really encouraging to hear, and I hope that, and Renee agrees as well, that as graduate students, we're doing a lot, and hopefully it can translate to the position itself. Well, excellent. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the main topic for today, which is the building and cultivating these relationships with your network. So we've had a few questions in the chat and from audience members above. How would you phrase your emails or your initial reaching out to the healthcare providers or KOLs so that you ensure that first meeting? And what are your approaches in that way?
Okay, to answer this question, I think then I'll break it into the audience, those who are not in the role, and those who are already in the role. For those who want to jump to land in the MSL, I think that it's important just at this point to get the interviews and get prepared for that, because honestly, it's gonna take 3 or 4 months before being in the field, being able to do those meetings. But every company has internal training, 3 months or 4. They provide a mentor. So there is a mentor, a scientific mentor, and there are modules to go over the therapeutic area of the disease state. And there is, in addition, a mentor, a functional mentor, to do about the logistic steps about getting the ID or those technical issues. So once you get there, again, there are compliance. There's a training about what writing skills, communication skills, what to write in an email, what not to do. So there is the mentor there. And there are also templates. So don't worry too much about that. Once you get there, there will be the training. And for those who are already in the MSL, again, the challenge, how do we get that attention? I think that it's been to have the objective. And I think that title, the email, is very important, because again, a lot of those are in academic KOLs. So to get their attention, I think that that's important to go to analyze what is their main interest, their publication, and try to find some common ground. Or even, if I really want to get into an institution, I'll take a look at the whole picture, at the whole group, like, who's on the group, and try to identify who will be an easy target to start networking and building up from there. Like, if someone has a same institution, then went to the same university or has a publication or something, it's easier to get access that way. And then once you had met with that person, with that HCP, then you can follow up, or he can, sometimes it happens, and they can introduce to the other colleagues. But again, sometimes very hard, but trying the publication and try to see, making about them people of attention. So that's very important, to building around that.
That's great. And we have some similar question on not just the initial meeting, but kind of the follow-up meeting. So from Winnie, we have 2 questions. How do you encourage KOL to respond to emails? So, and this includes maybe several emails have already been submitted and they're not receiving a response at that time. And a follow-up question as well is, what do you consider to be the most important thing when building that relationship with a KOL or a healthcare provider?
Okay, the first question, how to continue? Some of them, it's important to understand, then some of them, there are KOLs, they able to meet, but there are others, then they will never want to meet. So that's important, to be respectful. Then, and some of them, they will tell you right away, then they're not open to pharma or they're not interested. So, to understand that, then it's okay. There are plenty of them. So just let them. And for others who might not tell you, but they not reply, be persistent. Like, you don't want to be bothering them, emailing weekly or not even monthly. Just give the email a few times. If they don't reply, give them some time. A few months, you get back to them and they see that you are genuinely interested in reaching out. So they will eventually get back to you. But it's just finding the perfect time. And another aspect that I have found useful is attending the conference, the national meetings, or even regional meetings. They're very helpful. But it's important to be careful how to approach the HCP or KOL. Sometimes either with their colleagues, you don't want to go there immediately, but you just can follow. You can introduce yourself during the conference, but then follow up. They just mentioned then you met them at that X and Y conference and build from there. Or if they gave a presentation, they receive any acknowledgement award or something, follow up on that, congratulate them, and that's easier. And the second question?
And was what do you find most important when building a relationship with a healthcare provider or KOL?
Again, I think being concise and trying to be effective. Again, this is an internal journey, then it doesn't stop with getting the job. Just prepare, like, pre-call preparation. Know what you want. Ask yourself, what do you want to achieve with this meeting? And then, is this someone then I wanted to be, to collaborate with a company? Then, do that. But people are pretty busy, so that's important too. I used to write a note, like, my objective and like a outline. So then I go to the point, but sometimes it's important. Their agenda is first. We have our agenda, but it goes first. Sometimes, and I heard this when I was interviewing for my MSL. Then someone told me it's very important then to keep in mind. Then some of them, the KOLs, sometimes they just want someone to listen to them. So, and I think then that's that's true. I had experienced sometimes then, I go to the meeting and I have my question. I want to get some insights from them. But then the KOL starts, like telling me about their experiments when, trying to relate as a science what he was doing and now what it, just a pure scientific conversation. Then it's not even anything related about hereditary angioedema. But, that's exactly what we are building a relationship. We are not in sales. So it just, if that's the case, just listen to them. And an active listening is important because they appreciate when you follow up when something then they say. They surprise, and that, it's just like any regular conversation. So that's another point, active listening. Even if it is a visual meeting, keep, write down the points, pay attention what they're saying, and then if you bring it up again, they will appreciate that. Then you are paying attention.
Excellent. Okay, it's really helpful to hear. Okay, so our next question is, kind of following up on what you mentioned. So once you're connected with a healthcare provider or a key opinion leader, what is your approach in how often you maintain regular communication with people at with all those members? So what is your strategy when you're maintaining the relationship for the long term?
Okay, so that's, again, that might be different according to the medical strategy, because for those KOLs, sometimes we are in continuous communication because there are ongoing studies, then we need their opinion, they need to public, we need their signature for publication or X. So usually for them, I meet every 2 or 3 months. But for others who are tier 2, it's just probably once a quarter. Or community allergists, then once in a while. But it just, again, going back to the active listening. If I know what is their patient population, and then that, I keep Dr. Smith, he has 4 patients and he has one with this type or, something specific. And then I have another conversation with another KOL or HCP and something resonates. That, he needs. So that's important because then I can connect them. Sometimes we need to do that because some particular provider has some information or experience with a patient population. So, that's when they appreciate when you bring value, and the value can be providing education and very important to provide publication. Let's say community allergists, they are the clinic. They don't have access to PubMed or some publication, or they don't have the time to be, reading or searching. And it's easier if we know what they need and we can just, their compliance again, but, we can just say, are you aware of this publication? And then we can bring them to their attention. And then if they can request it, because that's another different process. We cannot, be emailing. We cannot be sending information. But again, that's, I had found then there a provider who asked me if I had some publications about the disease, something. So, that's easier for me. He doesn't have the time. So I'll send a link because that was open access. So, those are the key factors that are gonna nurture the relationship.
Excellent. That's really good. We also have another question when you're reflecting on not only the external relationships, but also what your definition of success is within the company. So we have a question: how do you measure your success as an MSL if you don't have sales targets?
That's a great point. And actually, I haven't updated my LinkedIn profile, but I received the 2021 Field Excellence Award. And in addition to that, I just received a few months ago a corporate award, One Takeda Approach. So,
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. So, tangible. And Takeda actually is one of the companies that has a clear distinction. We don't have many interactions with sales. So they very, very clear. We can, they can give a few introductions, but very limited. Okay, how do you measure? Again, going back to your independence skills. We do our territory planning, then of course it aligns with the strategy. But how do you measure success? It can be measured when you see the provider reaching out to you for, they say, do you have this information? Or in my case, this is a rare disorder. And one of my aims has been to expanding my network, not only to the list, then it's given, then it's already, they have a KOLs. It's easy, the KOLs. is that about the cell initiative. There are allergies, community allergies. Okay, they might not be familiar with my disease, hereditary angioedema. So I go and I try to have a meeting and educate them about this rare disorder. And I have up to now 3 of them, HCPs, who had never met with any MSL before. So, these are tangible. I'm expanding, I'm increasing the presence of the company in the radar, in these HCPs. But also, one of those providers, after the meeting, she reached out to me because a patient came and she needed some information. So, there's this piece of information. Then there is the provider who was not aware of the disease. Then she became interested after having the conversation, and then, reaching out. So those are measurable and objective, like my objectives, and I want to increase the outreach. So I think then those are tangible goals. And in addition, since this is a rare disorder, we are prioritizing teaching to providing medical presentation to allergy and immunology fellows. So also I had been, again, persistent, but I've been able to probably 4 or 5. I have provided 4 or 5 presentations to the allergy and immunology fellowships. Mm-hmm. Even in Chicago, Rush University, which is a very close institution. So, persistent, and I was able to get there. So, these presentations are what are tangible, and that's how I'm able to measure. Then I think that I'm doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. But again, goes back to the skill, being independent, and they can tell you these are the metrics, but you have to have the initial drive to see then you're making progress.
That's great to hear. Well, we're so lucky to have award-winning MSL as our speaker, and it was very helpful advice to know how to measure success when it's not necessarily the most defined clearly by another agent. Excellent. So we also have a kind of general question on how to stay informed so that you are maintaining an effective network. So do you have any trade publications or websites or just general ways that you stay updated on industry trends and what you need to know to add value to your network?
I think then I'm familiar only, and I try to read Pharma Forum to subscribe to the newsletter. That's useful. And I know that in the past, I used Fierce Biotech. Those were useful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but another point you mentioned, how to stay abroad. In the process, I know very few individuals who were able to land into the MSL after a few interviews. Very few. Mm-hmm. But most of us, as I said, it took me almost 2 years. My colleagues, for some of them, it took longer. So most of the people that I know, they had been through 10, 15 interviews, finals. So it's not easy. But don't be discouraged. And I know that that's not a question, but it just came to mind, to the point that every interview, if it is a different therapeutic area, different company, at the end, that builds up. You might not see it right away, but you learn a lot through the interviewing process. And that's, when you say, how do you keep abroad with a new technology, with a new pharma? All these interviews, it helps you because you have searched about the company, the products, and you might not get the job, but it's like it's a step that gets you closer to the role. And at the end, you'll see it, all those steps, when you see the news and then, positive result from X, and then it's like, okay, mm-hmm. Interview with them, but that's that's helpful.
Okay, good to know. Excellent. And then we have a question. What are your tips for maintaining professional relationships that are outside of LinkedIn or informational interviews? So do you have any other ways that you like to maintain those relationships?
Just stay connected, you know, reach out to people. Generally, people are very nice. Be humble. I think then humility takes you a long way. And, you know, people are open to share their opinion and be helpful. So just keep, you know, communicating with them. You know, once inside the company as well, you know, don't work in silos. Just reach out to people, to colleagues, introduce yourself, and that's help. That's helpful.
Okay, that's good to know. And then we have one more question, I think, in the chat right here. What is your strategy when it comes to building out your territory?
Again, that aligns with a medical strategy, but you know, what is their objective? And then along with that, I build my plan. And I know then it depends in the life cycle of the product, whether there is an incoming launch. So of course that had to align with that. For my territory now, the way I do it, it's again, since it is a rare disorder, and usually there is a gap of 8 to 10 years delay in diagnosis of this disorder. So we want to change that. We want people to get a proper diagnosis earlier. So my role is reaching out to community allergists, even some internists or GIs. So, you know, that's how I build that, trying to see tangible measurements.
Mhm.
But pretty much that's dictated by the strategy. Like we had one of our products, they're gonna file for indication for pediatrics. So, you know, I had to build my plan according to that. In the past, we didn't reach out to pediatrics, pediatric allergists. So now I had to include that in my territory. So then they're familiar with the product.
Okay, excellent. And I wanted to open up to our audience. Do you have any more remaining questions? And Gavin, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. Okay, we have one more in the chat. How specifically are you searching and refining your list of HCPs and KOLs to meet up with?
Honestly, sometimes it can be just as simple as doing a Google search. Like let's say I Google in Iowa, who's there, and I see allergists in, you know, Iowa City. And I'll narrow down, I'll go to the profiles. And that's challenging when they don't have profile online, but then I can just call the office and, you know, do they have patients or do they have interest? Because some of them, they focus only, again, this is allergists. Majority of them focus in asthma. And, you know, that's someone that I can just remove from my list if they don't have interest. And some of them, they are willing to hear about HAE. So, you know, I'll do that. I'll follow up. But, you know, and also, of course, it's easier to do a PubMed if they have publication. But being a rare disorder, that's not the case. There are very few research ongoing on HAE. So it's just the basic research, Google or, you know, and that has been helpful.
Excellent. And Gavin, did you have any other questions you wanted to jump in with?
I guess just kind of in line with that topic, just of identifying KOLs and searching for them. I guess just in such a digital and virtual age that we're in at the moment, hearing a little bit more discussion around digital opinion leaders. And just if you personally or your organization kind of has any medical strategy kind of targeted towards that, or how you might go about identifying and engaging those that are considered these digital opinion leaders these days.
Yeah, Gavin, you're right. Now, I think a lot of the companies, they are optimizing their programs to include digital opinion leader. And I think that that's a new term that it's becoming very prominent. Actually, at Twitter, I think someone mentioned in the chat something related outside Google, and Twitter is a great tool to identify HCPs or KOLs. Like Mayo Clinic, they had like their GI group who are there. So that's very helpful to identify new providers outside of the, that traditional way. They're very active.
Yeah, that's a good way. And I've personally used Twitter, not for, since I'm not in an MSL role, but just in kind of academic settings, following kind of like who are the, most well-known researchers out there, or academics, or even clinicians that are putting out information, and you'd see some of them a lot more active on Twitter that you can kind of identify that way too. So just another resource, yeah.
Yeah, and also, some of them, they have a lot of followers, so that's important also. So I think that there are companies now, then they are, including, in addition to the high impact of the publication and the PubMed data, they're using the numbers or followers they had in Twitter.
Yeah, and then just adding on to that as well, I've also found it a very good way for actually keeping up with some of the latest research coming out around topics of some of those like people on Twitter that it's very good resource for keeping up, depending on obviously how you tailor it for your own use and like targeting those kinds of things.
Correct, yeah. And even there are some journals, journal clubs there. I know for the allergy, the Journal of Allergy and Immunology, they have like a monthly journal, then it's discussed. And, people, they can just join HCPs and tweet their opinion, their comments. And that's a great way that has been useful to identify other allergies. Yeah, but definitely, for sure, that's, in the future, then the pandemic has affected, then there will be more DOL.
Yeah, and then that actually, just you mentioning the pandemic kind of leads me on to another question that I had as well, because I know you've been in MSL during COVID and all the lockdowns, and now as we've transitioned out of it more so. But I guess just asking kind of about, was it more challenging or different kind of challenges that you had maybe with kind of building those new relationships with KOLs or HCPs in a virtual setting compared to, is it maybe a little bit easier to build newer relationships, maybe if it's the opportunity in person?
Honestly, in time-wise, it was very convenient. And for the KOLs, it was a way, to get a communication with someone else, because we all struggled during the pandemic. But honestly, I don't think then face-to-face interaction can be replaced, particularly for one factor. When you are in a visual meeting, people are usually multitasking. You can, it's like you can see them, you can have that conversation, but sometimes they're not fully engaged. And when you are there in person, like they don't have a cell phone, they give you their full attention. So it's very different. And also when you go to the clinic or you happen to meet them at a conference, they can introduce you to their colleagues. And, it's just different environment. Even, at the meetings, at the conference, I think to me, that's a perfect way to interact, because you are interacting there with a peer-to-peer. It's the real life experience. It's not like when you go to their clinic, then, those sense, then, oh, it's that. by the receptionist, you sense immediately then you work for a pharma company, so they associate you with sales rep, and they put like, you know, the doctor there, the higher level, when we should be at the same. So that doesn't happen at a conference. We all at the same level, and the conversation, it's more relaxed, more organic. And, you know, if that was the first meeting in person, it's usually very, very meaningful. So that's, you know, but again, it's just I cannot highlight enough. If I know that we're running out of time. So in a nutshell, if I could give an advice and summarize what I've been telling, it starts with knowing yourself, what you want, and because if you know what you want, you convince yourself. Once you convince yourself and you have the skills, and then you can do the MSL job, you're gonna convince the hiring manager. And that confidence is what's gonna take you to the first meeting. And that confidence, you know, you're gonna project that, and it's gonna lead you to the subsequent meetings. But, you know, you have the skills, you just have to have that confidence, and know then those years in grad school had prepared you to get there.
Thank you so much, Guadalupe, for all those pearls of wisdom and all the advice that you imparted on our audience. We really appreciate your time and the effort you put in preparing for this webinar. So we're so glad that we were able to have you on as a speaker this month.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation again, and feel free to connect in LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect, and you know, that's my hope, to provide any advice. You know, we all started in the same place, so happy to help, and I'll provide the few points that might be useful.
Perfect.
And again, thank you for the invitation and for the flyer. I love that.
We're so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, thank you for being our speaker. This has been a fantastic discussion this evening, and then I just want to also congratulate you on those awards that you recently received too.
Yeah, thank you, both of you, and thank you everyone who took the time to attend. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
and then yeah, just so we add in as well, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn as well, me and Sonia. Happy to connect with people, and as always, if you have any suggestions or things that you might want to see on the webinar, then we're always open to those as well. And then yeah, we're just waiting on finalizing a time for our speaker for next month, so stay tuned for that. And then if you think this webinar series might be helpful or beneficial to anyone else, then feel free to share it around on social media or share it on LinkedIn or any kind of social media once we put it out, and welcome anyone to join the page as well who might be interested.
Excellent. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.